Well, Naledi, good morning to you and to our viewers. The relationship between Tumelo Madlala, who has been described as Senzo Meyiwa's friend, his relationship with the deceased really coming under scrutiny yesterday. You would recall that the defense is really trying to show at this particular point that Madlala basically betrayed his best friend, for example, by selling some of the personal photographs that he had with Meyiwa to Netflix. You would recall that the documentary regarding what allegedly was believed to have happened, that documentary was flighted just days before this trial had begun. So Advocate Zandile Mshololo yesterday trying to point to Tumelo Madlala as a friend who had betrayed the trust of his friend for financial gain by selling these photographs, personal photographs to Netflix. In his defense, Tumelo Madlala said that he would not have done so if he was not approached by two of the Meyiwa family members. He mentioned as Fiso Meyiwa as well as Sia Meyiwa. So when the defense then asked him, was he forced to do it? He said no, he was not. So what the defense is trying to do is to show that as Advocate Zandile Mshololo had previously mentioned, in fact, inside this court, there were assertions that were made that Tumelo Madlala was jealous of his so-called best friend. He was jealous of his soccer career, and he did not have his best interests in heart. That is what the defense is trying to point to here, Naledi. Also, quite crucially, the crime scene also coming under massive scrutiny yesterday. You would recall that the defense has long maintained that the crime scene where Senzo Meyiwa was killed had been tampered with, and that when police had arrived, it had been cleaned. Yesterday, inside court, exhibits or photographs that were taken by police from the scene showed 2 cans of beer that were on the scene when police arrived. Obviously, police would photograph what they find at the scene. A major concession that was made by Madlala yesterday, in which he agreed with the court that the 2 beer cans, which were photographs and are exhibits in this particular case, are not a true reflection of what the crime scene looked like at that particular time or when police arrived, because there were more beers that had been consumed on that day when Senzo Meyiwa was killed. So what we're seeing inside court, or the evidence that was taken by police, had long been tampered with. He made that concession that there is a possibility that indeed that the beer cans that you saw there were not a true reflection of what was taking place. Also, in a bid to clear her client to a certain degree, he was also asked by Advocate Zandile Mshololo whether he had had anything to drink at the time that he had identified accused number 2. I beg your pardon, accused number 2 is of course not the client of Advocate Zandile Mshololo, but the client of T.T. Tobane. That's where she started. I'll get to accused number 5 very shortly. When she asked about, recall that Madlala had said it was accused number 2, Bongani Ntanzi, who was pinned against the wall by the late soccer star, Advocate Zandile Mshololo saying that, in fact, at the time that when he says he had gone towards the kitchen and had seen Senzo Meyiwa pin, who he says is accused number 2, Bongani Ntanzi, against the wall, he had been drunk. They had consumed many beers at the time. He disputes this. But what Advocate Zandile Mshololo also went on to argue was that in addition to everyone being drunk at the house at the time, that he never participated in any identity parade in which her client was present. She asked also, have you ever seen my client? This is accused number 5, Fiso Ntuli. He said no, he had never seen her client before. So in this instance, you could see Advocate Zandile Mshololo, who's representing accused number 5, really try to move towards, asking one of the first occupants who were inside the house at the time, who was the first to appear before this court, whether he was able to identify her client, and he said no. So what we're expecting quite a lot today, Naledi and Desiree, is that for her to poke more holes in his testimony to show that he is not a reliable witness, in fact that he is not telling the truth. You would also recall yesterday the relationship between the Meyiwas and Madlala also coming under scrutiny. We've all come to understand and to hear that Madlala is the best friend of the deceased. And in this instance, we heard yesterday Madlala telling this court that the relationship between himself and the Meyiwas had basically gone downhill after the killing of Meyiwa. And, the defense basically saying, Advocate Zandile Mshololo saying, this is because he's not telling the truth about what happened on the day that Senzo Meyiwa was killed. When I looked towards the gallery yesterday, while he was talking about the relationship between himself and the Meyiwas, one of the Meyiwa family members stood up from the gallery and walked out of the court and returned at a later stage, clearly perturbed by what was being said inside the witness box. So at this particular stage, the defense really trying to